Welcome to the Mock Draft 1.0. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to come at me and say, "This isn't what I would do, Joe. Isn't what I would do." Well, this is not your mock draft, but if you have an opinion on it, let me know in the comments. We'll talk, and we'll tangle schwanzes, and maybe we'll meet in the middle. But I think this is a good mock draft for the Detroit Lions, especially my first mock draft. It's never perfect. Obviously, things can change, especially with free agents being added. And we heard Dan Campbell today earlier in the podcast. If you listen to the podcast, Detroit Lions News podcast, I'll put it in the YouTube description for you. But I was talking about how Dan Campbell. There's an urgency to get a cornerback in free agency or the draft. There is obviously stuff on Gilmore, Steven Nelson still available that I like, but I think the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to go corner in this draft. So let's get to it. My mock draft 1.0. For the first pick of the draft, I picked Kool-Aid McKinstry, and I'll get to the reasons why. But I'll just go in order, and we'll do this. If you're on a podcast, and you're listening in the audio version, you can go on the YouTube. I'll put the YouTube link in the description. Round 2, 61 overall, edge rusher Marshawn Kneeland. Round 3, 73rd pick overall, Devontae Walker, the wide receiver from North Carolina, he played half the year because he was ineligible because there was eligibility concerns with the NCAA, which we know the NCAA is a total farce anyways. Round 5, pick 164, Trevor Keegan, the guard from Michigan. I'll get to reasons why I like Trevor Keegan as a developmental guard, especially with Kevin Zeitler and Graham Glasgow being the starting guards. And then if we need Keegan or we need Sorsdahl as a guard replacement, these could be guys that we could use, especially with Kevin Zeitler being on a 1-year contract. Round 6, pick 201, I picked quarterback Josh Wallace from Michigan. I think Josh Wallace is an underrated cornerback in this draft. I'll get to the reasons why. Round 6, 205, 4 picks later, I picked center Dylan McMahon. I know Frank Ragnow has an issue with him potentially being a player who could potentially be on the edge of retirement. And the reason I went with Dylan McMahon, I think he could be a developmental center to learn under Frank Ragnow. I think this would be a great spot to get that center. I think Dylan McMahon is one of the steals of the draft, to be honest. I don't think a lot of people really paid attention to North Carolina State. And then with round 7, pick 249, I picked the kicker, Harrison Mevis. Obviously, I can't really go into a season with Michael Badgley as a kicker, so I said I'm going to go with the heavy kicker, Harrison Mevis from Missouri. And if you watch some of the games, he's got a great leg, and he's really clutch. He kicked the game winner with one of the games I was watching, and it was just perfect over there. So I want to get to the reasons why I picked these players. So let's start with Kool-Aid McKinstry. And Kool-Aid, these are some Pro Football Focus grades, and I'm not big on Pro Football Focus, but I just want to give you a grasp of what I've seen on film and what the Pro Football Focus is saying, and it kind of mirrors each other, to be honest. So Pro Football Focus, they nailed these college grades, but Kool-Aid McKinstry was the first pick of my draft. He had a good coverage grade. It was completion percentage was pretty good, 48.7%. Run defense grade was really good. Man coverage grade was really good. Zone coverage grade was really good. It's great to have a guy who's good in man, low completion percentage, but I really like a cornerback who is good in run stopping, run defense, because eventually over the course of a game, you're going to get a run to the outside, and you got to make those tackles. And there's some cornerbacks that will shy away from those tackles. And I don't like those cornerbacks. And I'm sure Dan Campbell don't like those quarterback corners. And I'm sure Aaron Glenn don't like those corners because, the reason that you got Kendall Vildor last year and the reason that you got um, some of these guys that you had last year was they were good in run defense. And that's a crucial part of the game because as we see with our run game, you can wear down the defense, you can take time off the clock. And if you're a corner, I need you to make a tackle. And run defense, when you're good in the run defense, I can count on you to make a tackle in the open field as well. So I went with Kool-Aid with my first pick, and obviously that was a pretty damn good pick. But my second pick was Marshawn Kneeland. And a lot of people are going to look at Marshawn Kneeland and say he went to Western Michigan. I understand that. But when you look at these grades that he had, this pass rush grade was off the charts. really good. His run defense grade was 83.4, really good. Every one of these you see there basically at the end. His pass rush win rate was 17.3%. His run stop rate was 11.0. And to be honest, when I watched Western Michigan, he stood out. He stood out number one because he made tackles when on the edge. One of the real things I loved about Marshawn Nealon. There's a couple of scrambling quarterbacks in the MAC, and he really chased them down really well. And the one thing I really liked about Marshawn Nealon was this simple, but yet a lot of edge rushers don't have this. And when Aiden Hutchinson came to the league, he really didn't have this you know this sense of, okay, I got to contain my edge. He contains his edge really well. With all those running quarterbacks they have in the MAC, he did a damn good job, and I love seeing it. And he doesn't have to be a superstar; he just has to be good. I look at Marshawn Nealon. I think the way he's good in the run defense. I think the way he's good in the pass rush win rate. I think he's a solid player to add to this defensive line. You add in a rotation with James Houston, with Marcus Davenport, with Josh Pascal. This could be a really good pick that could really end up really good for Detroit. There's some things he got to work on. The one thing I read on the NFL.com and what I see on film was sometimes his first step is a little laggy. Sometimes he's a little bit slow off the ball, but most of the time he does get a good grip on it. And when he played up to different levels of competition, he played pretty well over the course of his career. So let's go. Obviously, I went through Marshawn Nealon. This is going to be the interesting pick. It's Tez Walker. And Tez Walker is an XY receiver that I think could help the Detroit Lions. Full stop. His receiving grade for Pro Football Focus was 68.3. It was good. His yards per run route was 2.28. It wasn't that great, but it was high. His drop rate's a little bit too high, but listen, he's gonna drop balls. Yeah, this is a third round wide receiver. What you're hoping is that he gets better over time. I think part of the reason that he struggled this year, and this is just me, part of the reason I think he struggled this year was because of him playing the limited amount of games that he played because he was ineligible with the eligibility concerns from the NCAA. And we all know the NCAA is stupid as hell, but he came in there and I felt like there was games where he was trying to catch up to the speed of play. And I felt like he was really behind, and I really don't want to hold it against him because it's hard to put yourself in a football season when it's already started and trying to gain ground. We've seen that with J-Mo. J-Mo came in off his suspension. It took a little while for him to get going. And then when he got going, I mean, I think his best game was in the NFC Championship game. So those layoffs do hurt. They do. I can't look at Devontae Walker and say, yeah, that's the reason why. I can't say, he's not a good ball player because he had a lot of drops. I think a lot of those drops were the result of not playing for the first couple games. That's what I point to. He had a good quarterback in Drake May, a pro quarterback in Drake May. He did a damn good job. I thought he was really, really well orchestrated. Let's get to the rest of Tez Walker. His grade versus man coverage was low. Again, I attribute this to him being kind of rusty to start. Towards the end of the year, he started to be better in man coverage. He started to get separation, and that was pretty good to get. But the one thing that stands out to me with Tez Walker is the contested catch rate. You see that 58.8%. That's really good. And look, your X wide receiver, they don't have to be speedy. They have to go up and get the ball. I think of a guy like, obviously Josh Reynolds isn't speedy. He just goes up and gets the ball. I think of guys like Zay Jones, not a fast guy by any stretch of the imagination. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams. You don't need a fast guy. You just need a guy who can go up and make a catch. And Devontae Walker has showed that he could do that. And towards the end of the year, I thought Tez Walker was really starting to play his best football. And I felt like the eligibility concerns that the NCAA had, I felt that really hampered his development. And I think that When you look at these stats again, I think you could attribute it to not playing for the first part of the year. That's what I've attributed it to. So, when he came back, the first couple games I watched, they were pretty nonchalant, and then he got better as the season went on, like I said. So that's it. So going on to Trevor Keegan, obviously Trevor Keegan is a guy that I look at as a guy who could develop under Kevin Zeitler, under Graham Glasgow. This is a guy that really needs to improve his run blocking. You watch Michigan and you watch the national championship game, the holes he was doing. I felt like the run block grade that Pro Football Focus gave him was a little bit misleading. I thought there was a lot of interesting blocks that he had. There was a lot of polling that he did with Michigan and his zone grade, which Michigan went to his zone for a little bit, especially against Penn State and Ohio State. I thought he was, I thought he was good in that game. I thought mostly, when Blake Corum started to run over Penn State, they went to Trevor Keegan's side, and obviously, Zach Zenter got hurt later in the year, and Michigan didn't really skip a beat. So, Trevor Keegan's a really special player. I think he would be a great developmental guy under Kevin Zeitler, under Graham Glasgow. I think this is an opportunity that you have with Trevor Keegan to develop him. Um, Hank Fraley is a monster at the offensive line position as a coach. The way he got Coyote Osika to play good football for the most part. Colby Sorzal played games. He played pretty well for the most part. Dan Skipper was in there for a while. He played pretty good for the most part. I feel like with Hank Fraley, he puts together a hodgepodge sometimes, and he still gets good results. I look at Trevor Keegan as someone that he can really develop and take under his wing, and so can Kevin Zeitler, and so can Graham Glasgow, because Graham Glasgow went to Michigan, and I feel like that's a little bit of a great thing that Detroit has built in right now. I think they can take that step and say, okay, we're gonna go draft a guy who could potentially be a developmental guy in Trevor Keegan and make the most of it. Let's go back to the mock draft. Obviously, I have Josh Wallace at the 201st pick, and when I look at Josh Wallace, I'm getting him up right now. When I look at Josh Wallace, you look at Josh Wallace, and his coverage grade was really good. His run defense grade was really good. Man coverage grade was really good. Had a higher completion rate percentage. His zone coverage grade was really good as well. And when you look on film and you watch the Michigan football games, the one thing that stood out to me is they started to attack Josh Wallace a lot late this season. And his best games came against Penn State and Ohio State and Washington and Alabama. And I felt like he did a damn good job because a lot of teams were realizing late in the year, which I don't know why it took them that long, but they were realizing that Mikey Sanders still was a good player. They were realizing that Will Johnson is just an absolute animal. And at that point in time, they started throwing at Josh Wallace all the freaking time. And I felt like Josh Wallace was getting a lot of good passes thrown at him, and he was making some good plays on the ball. He was playing well. His completion, the coverage rate, the completion percentage against obviously was a little bit higher because that is the only person that they were really throwing at. They weren't really throwing at Will Johnson. I think Will Johnson, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. had a really damn good game against Will Johnson, but for the most part, Josh Wallace made some really crucial pass breakups, and I'd like to see what he would do as a developmental cornerback. I mean, you get these guys in the fifth and sixth round, these cornerbacks. You're not really looking at them and going, okay, I think this cornerback could potentially be a starter. You're not looking at him as a day one starter. Sure, there's outliers. Sure, there's players that can have an impact from the word go. But these guys in the fifth, sixth, seventh round, especially these cornerbacks, I mean, cornerback is a one position in the NFL where you could afford a year to learn. It's a faster game. The quarterbacks are better. The wide receivers are better, and it wouldn't help to learn under Aaron Glenn. It wouldn't help to learn under Carlton Davis. It wouldn't hurt to learn under, Amik Robertson. It would help to learn anything. You're learning from everyone. You're getting tips and points, and that's as good as a rookie. And Josh Wallace is a guy that I would really take a shot on. I think Josh Wallace is going to be a damn good corner in this league. The way that he played at Michigan, how he was getting thrown it all the time, I thought that was very, very interesting. And I just thought that Josh Wallace proved that he was a gritty guy, and he came from UMass. He was a transfer portal addition by the Michigan Wolverines, and he played pretty damn well at Michigan. And he was a big reason why they had a great year late in the year. Now, let's get to the rest of the mock draft. Dylan McMahon. Now, this is an interesting one because obviously people are going to be like, who is this Dylan McMahon guy? He's a center. And his run block grade for the year was 67.8, was pretty damn good. Pass block rate was pretty good. It was not as high as I would like it to be. Zone grade was pretty good. True pass block grade was pretty damn good. His gap grade was in the middle, but again, he's going to have the opportunity to learn under Frank Ragnow. That's what I look at with Dylan McMahon. I think Dylan McMahon can be a steal for this team. I think Dylan McMahon, the way that he plays, is just dead set. Like he wants to bury people. When you watch North Carolina State, they went behind him all the time. It was very interesting to watch North Carolina State last year. They didn't have a really talented team, but the offensive line that they had, there was some underclassmen there that are going to be in the draft next year. But Dylan McMahon stood out because they ran by him all the time. Like they ran, either a dive to the left side or a dive to the right side, and he was going up to the second level quickly, and just thought it was a good pick for the Detroit Lions there. And then you look at the Detroit Lions moving forward. I mean, the Detroit Lions with the Harrison Mevis pick. Obviously, Harrison Mevis was the last pick of the draft for me. Uh, he's a guy who can hit clutch kicks. If you watch Missouri, he was really good. He's an accurate kicker, can make all the kicks that you want him to make. And personally, I thought Harrison Mevis would have been the best pick personally in that seventh round because you need a kicker to kind of compete with Michael Badgley. So Michael Badgley and the Detroit Lions, we'll see what happens. But this is an interesting thing for the Detroit Lions. I think they have the opportunity to be a good football team, and this mock draft is a staple of it. Obviously, you can draft some players that are developmental, like Josh Wallace, like Dylan McMahon, like Trevor Keegan, and you're not really basing your hope on if they're going to be good. That's what you base your hope on. So I look at this mock draft and I go, this is a good chance for the Detroit Lions to get better. And this mock draft puts this team in perspective that they can make the right moves. And overall, I like the mock draft. Overall, I like the mock draft. Is there some things I would change? Absolutely. But I think this mock draft really puts it in perspective of what the Detroit Lions could do at that position. I'm Joe Chap with the Detroit Lions in this podcast. I'll see you in the next podcast. Obviously, I broke this up into segments because I had issues with, obviously, my dog was barking, and so I had to record this on a different platform. So I'm back, and so if you're watching YouTube, you're not going to learn anything. But obviously, if you're on the podcast, I had to kind of make a new video. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening on the Detroit Lions News podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chap, and I will see you in the next podcast as we talk more Detroit Lions football next week, probably around next Tuesday or Wednesday. But we'll see you in the next podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a great one, and go Lions.